The lobby smelled like artificial lavender and carpet cleaner, and I sat in a cushioned chair near the window watching the parking lot. My daughter had said they'd be right back. Just 5 minutes? She needed to grab my overnight bag from the car. That was 40 minutes ago. I had no bag. I had no wallet. I had no phone. What they didn't know, what neither my daughter nor her husband had any reason to suspect, was that I hadn't taken my pill that morning. And for the first time in 8 months, my mind was clear enough to understand exactly what was happening to me. I want to tell you this story. Before I do, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I've heard from people all across the country who've been through something like this, and knowing you're out there matters more than you know. Also, I want to be upfront. This story blends real awareness with some dramatized elements for impact, but everything I'm about to share about the nature of elder abuse, the tactics, the warning signs, the way it can happen inside a family you trust without question, that part is as real as anything gets. My name is Elmer. I'm 67 years old. I spent 34 years as a licensed electrician in Tucson, Arizona, wired hospitals, schools, 2 of the hotels out on Speedway Boulevard. I'm not the kind of man who forgets things. I keep a logbook, always have. My wife Trudy used to tease me about it. She'd say I'd log the time I sneezed if I thought it mattered. We were married 41 years. She died 3 years ago, June of 2022, in our bedroom in the house we'd owned since 1993. The paramedics said it was a heart attack. Sudden. No warning. A woman who had been to the doctor every single year for 3 decades without a single alarming result. Gone by morning. I didn't question it. I was 64 years old, and I had just lost the only person who had ever truly known me, and I didn't have the energy to question anything. That was my first mistake, though I wouldn't understand it for another 2 years. 8 months before the morning, I sat in that lobby in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My daughter came to visit me for a long weekend. She was worried, she said. She'd noticed some things. I'd called her by her late mother's name twice, on the phone in the same month. I'd left the back burner going after making coffee. I'd told the same story about a fishing trip twice in one conversation without realizing I'd already told it. She was gentle about it. She brought printed pages from a medical website. She held my hand across the kitchen table and said, "Dad, I think we need to get you seen by someone." She brought me to a neurologist, or at least, I believe she did. I remember blue chairs in a waiting room. I remember a man in a white coat asking me to count backwards from 100 by sevens. I remember the drive home being very quiet. What I do not remember is ever seeing that doctor's name on a business card, or filling out paperwork in my own handwriting, or being handed anything in writing about any diagnosis. The appointment lives in my memory the way a dream does, present but soft around the edges, lacking the texture of something real. What I do remember clearly is that 2 days later, my son-in-law began bringing me a small blue capsule every morning with my orange juice. "For your memory," he said. The neurologist prescribed it. "It'll take a few weeks to start working." He set the glass on the counter and waited, smiling, until I swallowed. He is 44 years old. He sells commercial real estate, or he did until about 18 months ago, when 3 of his biggest deals collapsed inside of 6 weeks and he started making phone calls in the garage with the door pulled shut. He married my daughter 11 years ago. I walked her down the aisle. I gave a toast at the reception. I thought he was decent. Within 3 weeks of starting those capsules, I could not reliably say what day of the week it was. Within 2 months, I was sleeping 12 and 13 hours at a stretch. I got lost driving to the hardware store I had been going to for 15 years. My daughter found me sitting on a park bench 4 blocks from home one Tuesday afternoon, not entirely sure how I'd gotten there. She cried. I apologized. I thought the lights were simply going out in my mind, one by one, the way they go out at the end of things. I had begun quietly to make peace with that. But on the morning of October 14th, 2024, one of the capsules slipped out of my fingers at the bathroom sink. It bounced behind the toilet. I got down on one knee and swept my arm back there and couldn't find it anywhere. I didn't want to ask for another one and have anyone see me fumbling, so I went downstairs to breakfast without it. By 9 that morning, I was humming along to a song on the kitchen radio, and I knew its title and the name of the artist. By 10, I remembered exactly where I'd set my reading glasses the night before. By 11, When my son-in-law walked in and asked if I was ready to go see the facility, I was sitting at the kitchen table reading the newspaper and understanding every word. He said it was just a tour, a look around. My daughter had found a wonderful memory care community in Albuquerque, modern, warm, specialized staff, very affordable. About 3 hours north. She thought a change of scenery might help while they figured out a longer-term plan for me. She talked about it the whole drive up, her voice bright and reassuring in the front seat. I nodded along and watched the Sonoran Desert give way to high desert plain, and I held onto the clarity in my mind the way you hold a live wire. Carefully, with complete attention, knowing one wrong move and it's gone. 3 suitcases in the trunk. I had counted them once my son-in-law loaded the car that morning. None of them were mine. My son-in-law had offered to hold my wallet before we left, said he'd keep all the documents organized, and I'd handed it over the way I'd learned over 8 months to hand things over without asking why. The facility was called Sunrise Ridge Memory Care. It sat just off the interstate in the North Valley, low adobe walls, a courtyard with a fountain, staff who smiled with practiced warmth when the doors slid open. The woman at the front desk greeted my son-in-law by name. Not my name, his. My daughter kissed my cheek. "Sit tight, Dad. We'll be right back, just grabbing your bag." There was something careful in her voice, measured, the voice of a woman who has already made up her mind and is being very deliberate about the words she chooses. The doors slid closed. I sat. 10 minutes passed. 15. A staff member wheeled a resident past the window, and the resident looked through me as if I weren't there at all. I thought, that is not going to be me. 25 minutes. I got up, walked to the front desk, and asked the receptionist if I could use the phone. I called my grandson. He is 21, my daughter's son from her first marriage, which means my son-in-law is his stepfather, which means the warmth between them was roughly what you'd expect from that arrangement. My grandson was finishing his 2nd year at the University of New Mexico, about 30 minutes from where I was sitting. He answered on the 2nd ring. I said, "Your mother and her husband brought me to a memory care facility this morning and left me in the lobby without my wallet or my phone. I didn't take my medication today. My head is clear. I need you to come get me right now." A long silence, then I'm on my way. 28 minutes. He came through the front doors and crossed the lobby without breaking stride and hugged me hard. I felt the tension in his shoulders and understood that he had been carrying something for longer than just today. In the car, he told me he'd had doubts for months. He'd tried to ask his mother about the diagnosis, about who the specialist was. She'd told him not to worry, that the doctor had explained everything to her directly. He'd let it go because she was his mother. But he said something about my son-in-law had always sat wrong with him. The questions the man had asked about my house, over the years, the way he'd mentioned my life insurance policy, at a Christmas dinner the previous December, as if it were a perfectly natural topic for the table. My grandson thought maybe he was just being paranoid. He'd told himself that. He took me to his apartment, 1 bedroom, textbooks stacked on every flat surface, a kitchen barely wide enough for 2 people to stand in. He made coffee and sat across from me and said, "Tell me everything from the beginning." The next morning, he drove me to a walk-in medical clinic on Central Avenue. I handed the physician the capsule I'd taken from the bathroom counter the morning before, slipped into my shirt pocket while no one was looking. The doctor sent it to the lab. 2 days later, the results came back. Lorazepam, high dose, combined with diphenhydramine. Neither is a memory medication. Lorazepam is a sedative, used to treat anxiety and induce sleep. At the dosage in that capsule, taken every single day for 8 months, it would produce exactly what I had been living through. Confusion, memory gaps, 12 hours of sleep a night, disorientation on roads I had driven for decades. The diphenhydramine compounded the sedation. Together, they had been quietly and systematically dismantling my ability to think. I sat in the consultation room after the doctor told me and looked at my hands for a while. I thought about the mornings I had stood at that sink and taken the glass my son-in-law handed me and swallowed without question because I trusted the people around me. I thought about 8 months of my life. Then I asked my grandson to find me an attorney. Her name was Carla Huang, elder law specialist, downtown Albuquerque. She was 50 years old, direct and precise, with reading glasses she kept taking on and off while she listened. When I finished, she set the glasses down on her desk and said, "What you've described is criminal elder abuse, and if the financial picture is what I suspect, it's also fraud and exploitation of a vulnerable adult." She called a financial investigator that afternoon. His report arrived the next morning. My son-in-law had borrowed $780,000 against a restaurant franchise investment that had collapsed into 2023. The primary lender was pressing for repayment on a deadline roughly 6 weeks out. He'd taken a second mortgage on his own home and exhausted every credit line in his name. In November of 2023, 2 months before the blue capsules appeared in my life, he had been added as a joint account holder on my primary checking account, with full withdrawal access. My house in Tucson's Rincon Heights neighborhood was worth $525,000, paid off entirely. My retirement accounts totaled $347,000. My life insurance policy, which I had carried for 20 years, was worth $175,000. If I were declared mentally incompetent, he could petition for guardianship and begin the process of liquidating everything before anyone outside the family thought to ask questions. Carla set the report down. She said, "There's something else. In August of this year, your son-in-law took out a life insurance policy on your daughter, $350,000, so beneficiary is himself." My grandson had gone completely still on the chair beside me. He said very quietly, "He's going to kill her after he gets the money." Carla said, "That is what this evidence suggests." Yes. I thought about Trudy, about the morning she died, June, no cardiac history, a woman who had never given her doctor a moment of real concern. I thought about a conversation we'd had 3 weeks before she died, out on the back porch, watching the mountains go dark. She'd said, "Elmer, something feels wrong with my blood pressure medication. I feel strange in a way I don't recognize." I'd told her to call the doctor first thing in the morning. I'd squeezed her hand and gone inside to wash the dishes, and I had never had another conversation with her in my life. I told Carla that my son-in-law had been staying with us temporarily that spring, helping with repairs on the house, that he'd had access to the kitchen and to our medicine cabinet, that he'd picked up Trudy's prescription refills from the pharmacy twice, because he'd offered and she'd said it was convenient. Carla called Detective Ochoa with the Elder Abuse Unit. He was there within the hour, quiet, methodical, a man who writes everything down before he speaks. He asked whether I'd be willing to give my son-in-law a reason to come to me. That night, before Detective Ochoa's team wired the house, I went into the bedroom. Trudy's cedar chest still sat at the foot of the bed. I hadn't opened it since the week after her funeral. I'm not entirely sure what made me open it that night. I lifted the lid, folded quilts, a shoebox of photographs, her mother's costume jewelry, and at the very bottom, wrapped inside an old dish towel, a small spiral notebook with her handwriting on the cover. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. February 3, 2022. Something is wrong with the retirement account statement. The December balance doesn't match what I calculated. I showed Rex the statements, and he said I was probably just confused about the numbers. He was very calm about it. I don't know why that bothered me. February 19, 2022. Rex picked up my prescription today. I feel very tired. I've been feeling tired since last week. I thought it was the weather. March 2, 2022. I don't trust Rex. I have not trusted him for a long time, and I have been telling myself that it's just a personality clash, that he's good for our daughter, that I'm being unfair. I don't think I'm being unfair. I think something is wrong, and I don't know how to say it to Elmer without sounding paranoid. March 14, 2022. Very tired today. Dizzy when I stand up too fast. Rex brought lunch over. He is always so helpful. The next page was blank. She had died 4 days after that last entry. I sat on the edge of that bed for a long time, holding the notebook, and the grief that came over me wasn't the familiar grief I'd lived with for 3 years. It was something else. Grief and fury together, inseparable, the way they can only mix when you understand that the thing you mourned as a loss was actually a crime. She had known. She had been trying to record it the way I always recorded things, because she had spent 41 years married to a man who kept logbooks. And she understood that if you write it down, it exists. I gave the notebook to Detective Ochoa. The next morning I borrowed a phone and called my daughter. I made my voice uncertain, searching for words, the way it had sounded every day for 8 months. I said I was home and I didn't quite know how I'd gotten there, and I was scared. I heard her breath catch. I heard her say to someone nearby, "He's home," and then the pause where my son-in-law came on the line. He asked careful questions. Where exactly was I? Had I spoken to anyone? Had someone given me a ride? I said I didn't know. I was confused. He said he'd be there by morning. His voice was steady and patient, the voice of a man who had already decided what would happen next. He arrived at 9:40 a.m. alone. My daughter stayed in Tucson. He had told her it would be better if she rested, that he would handle it. He let himself in through the front door with the key he'd had for over a year. He had a small pharmacy bag. Inside it, 3 blue capsules in a Ziploc bag. He said the facility had sent the rest of my supply home with him. He poured a glass of water. He set it on the table in front of me. He picked up the bag. I said, "Before we do that, I need you to tell me something." He stopped. The smile stayed. The quality of it changed. I said, "I found Trudy's notebook." The smile disappeared. He sat down across from me. He looked at me for a long time, and I watched him make a decision, the way you can sometimes see a decision happen in a person, a thing behind the eyes shifting into place. He said, "You know what Trudy's problem was, Elmer? She kept records, always scratching things down. She called me in February, actually. Did you know that? Said she'd noticed something off in the account statements. Said the numbers weren't right. I told her she was probably just tired. I told her to take her blood pressure medication and get some rest." He paused. "I offered to pick up her prescription, since you were working late. She said that was very thoughtful of me." I held still. He said, "She was good about taking what she was given. She trusted people." He looked at me evenly. "You were supposed to be the same way." "And me, what was the plan?" He leaned back. "Albuquerque," he said. "Comfortable, quiet, settled. By the time anyone started pulling at the accounts, the house, the insurance, it would have taken months. The money would have been gone." He said it as though he were describing a completed project, something that had already wrapped up cleanly and simply hadn't gone quite according to schedule. "You were never supposed to be sitting here having this conversation, Elmer." The front door came in hard. Detective Ochoa came through first, 2 officers behind him. My son-in-law was against the wall and cuffed before he finished the second word of a sentence he didn't get to complete. He said, as they walked him toward the door, "You set me up." I said, "I let you talk. There's a difference." He was charged with elder abuse, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, chemical restraint, fraud, and attempted murder. The murder charge, Trudy's murder, came 2 months later, after the court approved the exhumation of her remains. The toxicology confirmed elevated potassium in the cardiac tissue, consistent with injection, inconsistent with natural cardiac death. She had not had a heart attack. She had been killed in our bedroom on a June morning in 2022, and I had spent 3 years mourning what I believed was the natural end of a long and healthy life. He was sentenced to 45 years to life, no possibility of parole. The judge cited premeditation spanning at least 3 years. My daughter cooperated from the moment investigators showed her the life insurance policy he had taken out on her. She read the document twice in a detective's office and sat quietly for a long time. Then she said, "I thought he loved me." She had known the diagnosis was arranged. She had known the pills were not what he claimed. What she chose not to fully know was what the end of the plan looked like. She pled to 1 count of neglect of a vulnerable adult. She received probation and mandatory counseling. I don't know what to do with that. Some days I understand it, some days I don't. I've stopped trying to resolve it quickly. My grandson called me after the sentencing. He said my son-in-law had looked at the floor the entire time the judge read the sentence. He said, "Grandpa, I'm changing my major. Criminal justice. I want to work elder abuse cases." I told him he'd been moving toward that for a while and just needed a name for it. There is a photograph on my desk. Trudy and me on the back porch, summer of 2019. She is laughing at something out of frame. I still don't know what it was, but I remember that afternoon, the light through the cottonwood at the edge of the yard, the cold beer in my hand, the feeling of having built exactly the life I'd meant to build through 34 years of honest work. He tried to take that from me. He took Trudy. He tried to take the house and the savings and whatever years I have left. He tried to turn me into a man who couldn't hold a thought long enough to resist. I dropped a pill behind a toilet. My head cleared. I counted the suitcases. And I asked for a phone. Before you go, if this reached you, I want you to hear a few things clearly. Because I spent 8 months believing I was losing my mind, and if anyone listening is sitting with that feeling right now, I need you to know something. If a family member is managing your medication and you cannot remember the appointment where a doctor prescribed it, ask. Call the office yourself. Ask to see the prescription in writing. Ask until someone places it in your hand. That is not paranoia. That is your right, and it has always been your right. If you feel foggy in a way that feels wrong, not slow with age, but foggy, like gauze over everything, like the person you know yourself to be is just slightly out of reach, pay attention to that feeling. Write it down. I kept logbooks for 34 years. I should have kept one for my own mind. Stay connected to someone outside your immediate household. One person who knew you before the new medications, before whoever moved in and started organizing your life, before the fog began. For me, that was my grandson. 21 years old and 30 minutes away, and he picked up on the second ring. And if something doesn't add up, if the suitcases are wrong, if the doctor's name doesn't match, if the story stopped making sense somewhere along the way, and nobody will answer a straight question, say something. To anyone. The woman at the front desk. A stranger in the parking lot. Anyone within reach. You are not confused. You are not a burden. You are not disappearing. Drop a 2 in the comments if this story moved you. And if someone you love needs to hear it, please share it. You never know whose life that might reach. Stay sharp. God bless.